We are going to start our speaker series this evening on reading success plans. My name is Craig Hamby. I'm the Director of Elementary Education here at Lindbergh Schools. I have with me Dr. Sarah Valter, who is our District Literacy Coordinator, and Mrs. Maureen Stabler, who is our District Intervention Coordinator. So a little background information before I turn the floor over to these ladies this evening. And also, of course, we have Beth Johnson on our slides tonight in the background for us. In the state of Missouri, this previous spring, there was a law passed called Senate Bill 681, and it was an advocacy law for literacy in elementary schools, I would say. And part of that is that it states that any students who are reading a year or more behind, or a year or more behind in their reading skills, will receive a reading success plan, which is basically a plan of action where we can get those students back up to reading where they need to be. Usually this takes a little bit of time and doesn't always happen in 1 year, but it gives us a nice plan of action for each of these students who is not in a place where we want them to be. So we at Lindbergh call that our Lindbergh Reading Success Plan. So if you see the acronym LRSP, that's what we are talking about. We have implemented for a couple of years, we've had reading success plans for us, but now we are following the state guidelines for these reading success plans. And we're in pretty good shape of getting things done because at Lindbergh, we are fortunate to have several reading specialists on staff at each of our elementary schools that provide some extra intervention for our students who we have some concerns with in reading. So we are very fortunate to have those. So those reading intervention teachers work with our classroom teachers and even other staff in the schools to make sure we're doing everything we can for our students. So tonight we're going to go through what these reading success plans are, what might be included in them, what you might see if you are a parent and your student has a reading success plan, and even all the way to how would I exit if my student has a reading success plan, what do they need to do to exit from this plan? So while Mrs. Stabler and Dr. Valter are talking about the reading success plans, I will be monitoring the Q&A. So there is a button should be at the bottom of your screen where you can put questions. We will probably answer most of the questions live. If it's a quick one, I might go ahead and answer it in the chat for you, but I'll be moderating those. And then after we're done with the presentations, towards the end of the slides, I will present these questions to our presenters, and we'll make sure we get all our questions answered this evening. So without any further ado, Dr. Valter, Mrs. Stabler, Beth, would you like to begin the slideshow? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Beth, if you wouldn't mind advancing to slide number 3, please. All right, some of you may already have a pretty good idea about what a reading success plan is. We have sent them home to families in the past. As Dr. Hamby said, we have made some shifts and adjustments in response to state legislation this year. But a broad view of a reading success plan is that they are personalized plans given to students who have specific areas of need in reading. We go through a very intensive process of screening students multiple times a year. Based on those screenings, identifying students who have specific areas of need, and then diving in deeper with some additional assessments to really pinpoint what specific areas of instruction a student needs. So a reading success plan is a document that is used to set goals, maintain student data and show progress, and communicate back and forth between classroom teachers, interventionists, and of course families to make sure that everyone on that child's team is working together to help that child make growth in reading. Next slide, please. So who receives a plan? Broadly, under the state guidance, all elementary students in grades 1 through 5 receive a plan if they meet specific criteria. So the first criteria is following our reading screening, which occurs fall, winter, and spring. Students who are identified as being at risk are given additional tests. We refer to these as diagnostic assessments, not because they are used to diagnose students with any specific category of reading difficulty, but because they help us pinpoint specifically where students need instruction and where they're showing areas of strength. Following these assessments, students who demonstrate risk are provided with a reading success plan that includes what the area, how it will be addressed, and who will be providing that support and instruction. A plan is also provided to students with a formal dyslexia diagnosis. So students who have a documented diagnosis of having dyslexia are provided with a reading success plan as well. Right, next slide, please. So as I mentioned previously, supporting the plan is definitely a team effort. Students who have a plan are receiving targeted instruction, meaning that we have pinpointed one specific area of need or multiple areas of need. And many of those students, a majority of those students in elementary, receive a plan and are provided support with pull-out reading intervention with our reading interventionists or reading specialists. So that's an additional support in addition to the classroom instruction that student is receiving. Some students have a specific area of need that can be targeted in the classroom. And so some students with a plan may receive instruction within their classroom that is also personalized, it is specific, and it is focused. Our classroom teachers are prepared to provide this instruction, as are our literacy teaching assistants who work in grades K through 2 and occasionally in grades 3 through 5 to provide that very specific targeted instruction and to monitor students' growth and progress over time. Next slide, please.
Okay, so now we're going to take a little bit of a dive into what the plan is going to actually provide to parents when it comes home, and also show you an example of what this plan might look like, so that when it comes home to you, you have a little bit of understanding of the document that you're being provided. These are just some of the areas that the outline is going to, that the plan is going to outline for you. So it will talk about the specific areas of need that your student has regarding literacy based on those assessments that Dr. Valter just mentioned. It's also going to outline the person providing the intervention, as well as when that plan will occur and how often it's going to happen. There'll be a specific goal in the plan as well, and then some data that's going to support how your student qualified for that plan, and also how we're going to actually track the growth and progress that your student's going to make in response to the interventions that they'll be provided. And there'll be a link embedded in that plan that you can access at home to get some ideas of resources that you can use and activities that you might do at home to support literacy development for your students. And Beth, if you go to the next slide, this is an example of a plan. So if you've had a student who's been in reading intervention in the last year, you've probably seen a plan that looks very similar to this. So what you'll notice is at the top, just some general information about the student, and then that area that will break down what area based on those diagnostic assessments that the student was identified as needing some support with. So it will say phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, or comprehension. It may have more than one area based on those assessments. And then you'll see whether the intervention is being provided in a whole group setting, small group, or individualized instruction, when that plan will begin, as far as when the actual services or intervention supports will begin, where it's happening, and then that frequency piece. So is it, on this example, 20 minutes? And that may vary depending on the needs of your student. And then also, how often is it going to happen? So is it daily, or is it going to be 3 times a week? You'll be given all of that information. Then you'll see the actual goal for the student. So that goal will be written by the person responsible for writing that success plan. So it could be the reading specialist or a classroom teacher. They're going to use the assessments that we've given and then set a goal for your student based on their area of need and the intervention that they're going to be doing. And then you'll have all of those graphs that you see at the bottom of this slide that just outline the assessments that your student was given. It goes back historically too, so you'll be able to look and see on these graphs how your student scores on these assessments have changed over time. Next slide. And so you'll see, again, that those plans will be coming either from a reading specialist or from the classroom teacher, depending on who's going to be supporting that reading success plan for your student. And it's going to come home. The first communication will be coming home shortly. And then you'll receive, if it hasn't already, and you'll be receiving additional communications 3 more times throughout the year. So at the end of each trimester in elementary school, or if you have a student who's receiving reading intervention at middle school, it'll be coming home at the end of each quarter. And then this is a bit.ly that just shows you what the link at the bottom of the plan is going to look like, so that you can click on that link. It doesn't look like it's a hyperlink document, but when you actually look at the PDF, you'll click on it and it will take you to a slide deck that will show you those plans and activities you can do at home to support literacy. Next slide.
All right, as Maureen mentioned, some plans may have already been sent home. It is not only a fall cycle when we screen students again in winter. Students who already have a plan may continue on that plan. We may also, we're making sure that we don't miss any students. And in the winter, we also will start giving plans to kindergartners. So kindergarten students can begin qualifying for plans mid-year. However, the goal in having a reading success plan is that it is something that your child is going to eventually outgrow by closing the gaps in reading. So there are a few circumstances where we hope to support your child to the point where they no longer need this plan. We can exit a student from a plan if we have multiple data points showing that that student is able to perform their reading skills at their grade level. So this is when a student has not only closed the gap, but can perform at grade level without ongoing intervention support. So even when the student has closed that gap, we're going to continue progress monitoring for a period of time to make sure that student is continuing to excel without all of the supports in place. Students who have a plan will continue to have that reading success plan until they demonstrate the goals have been met. So what that means for students is once they qualify for a plan, that plan will stay with them until they meet their goals or until they exit from high school. So that ongoing support will be provided as long as that student needs to have that support to be successful at reading. Next slide, please. Right, so we would like to open it up. If any participants have questions, we are happy to answer those.
So I've had it open. I've been watching, monitoring. We don't have any questions. You guys did such a wonderful job presenting the information that we have no questions right now. So I'm going to stall for just a moment and give people a chance to type any questions in. Let's see. Allison has raised a hand, but Allison, you're going to have to type your question in the Q&A. We can't, this format that we're doing with the speaker series isn't the same as a normal Zoom meeting. So you have to type in the Q&A. We can't call on you to speak live on the group. So if you don't mind typing that in the Q&A real quick. Any other notes off the slides? Oh, who sets the goals? Great question, Allison.
I can answer the who if Maureen, you want to share a little bit about the how. So the goals are set based on the data that we already have on a student. And the ultimate goal is that that student reaches grade level proficiency. However, the goals that are set that you're going to see on the plan are in response to data. So if I have a student who's working on reading fluency, you'll see their initial data. And then the goal will be, where do they need to be to close the gap and to be approaching grade level proficiency. So Maureen, is there anything you want to add to that? So reading interventionists, classroom teachers are the ones who set the goals.
Yes, so reading interventionists and classroom teachers, and from the data side of things, pretty much what they're doing is looking at those initial screening scores that they got when the student was given those different assessments that you'll see on the plan. And then based on the area of need, they're going to look at those assessments And they're going to say, which of these assessments is measuring the thing that I am working on with this student? Where are they now? And where do I want them to get to by the end of this intervention cycle? So some plans may be set for right now to have a goal for December, and then we'll revisit when we give that next screener and decide what the student needs moving forward. So goals may change and evolve over time as students make progress throughout the year, but they're using those diagnostics and those screeners that we give to all students 3 times a year to see where's the need and then set a goal from there.
All right, thank you. We have a couple more questions here. What assessments are being used to screen, especially in grades 3 through 5? But if you guys don't mind, let's go ahead and give the rundown of our universal screeners from K up through 5, please.
Perfect. So we began with FastBridge assessment in kindergarten through 3rd grade. And FastBridge is the screening instrument we've used for the past 5 years. FastBridge is a broad assessment of reading fluency, reading comprehension, phonics, phonemic awareness, and as students get older, it begins to look at vocabulary. Students in grades 3 through 8 take the NWEA growth assessment in ELA. So for students in grades 3 through 8, if their student is in the at-risk percentile on NWEA, we recommend checking other assessment data, speaking with the classroom teacher, and based on looking at those data points, we would then further screen some of those students with FastBridge. Families also can request FastBridge screening for older students, although every student takes NWEA in grades 3 and up.
All right, thank you. This is a great one here. Can you please explain the difference between phonics and phonemic awareness? Dr. Valter, that's got you written all over it.
It does. I'm excited to answer this one. So phonemic awareness is the awareness that words are made up of sounds. So it's all about the auditory behaviors and skills that kids need to be readers. In order to be a reader, kids need to be able to hear individual sounds and words and to take them apart and put them together. So when kids are sounding out a word as they're reading, they need to know that if I hear k, at, I can blend all of that together to make the word cat. Or when I'm writing words down, when I hear the word man, I can separate those sounds. So phonemic awareness is all about auditory skills and being able to hear and manipulate sounds and words. We assess for that using a test called the PAST, and it invites kids to do things like, if I have the word house, say the word house. Now, instead of a sound at the beginning, say and we want the child to be able to say mouse. So we want to know that kids can manipulate sounds and words. So phonemic awareness is something that kids can do without print in front of them. Phonics, because English is a sound-based spelling system, phonics is where we make that connection between the printed letters and the sounds. So for kids to be able to perform in phonics, they need to be able to decode the words on the page and then to encode words when we ask them to spell them. So print is involved when it's phonics. Phonemic awareness is all just hearing behaviors.
Thank you, Dr. Valter. One of the things that was explained to me years ago that helped me understand was that as humans, our brains are wired for oral language, the phonemic awareness to be able to hear things. But then somewhere in the last hundreds of years, we introduced written language, which we have to rewire our brains. And that's where the phonics comes in for that. 2 more questions right now in the hopper. Is grade level proficiency set at the 25th percentile, or how is proficiency determined? Well, it's going to depend on the assessment we use in the grade level, and I'll let one of these ladies go a little deeper into that answer. As they stare at each other.
Sarah, do you want to explain how maybe the cut scores for risk level on FastBridge first?
Sure. So FastBridge itself identifies high risk as being the 15th percentile and below. So specifically in kindergarten and 1st grade, We know that the 25th percentile on a normed assessment is the low end of average, or kind of at that, in that average range. So for looking at kindergarten and first grade specifically, we kind of bypass and go into some of the students who are overall considered some risk on FastBridge and look up to the 25th percentile. It does vary by assessment. So NWEA puts that cut point for being at risk at the 20th percentile. The other assessments we give any student who is high risk on either any of the 3 assessments given to the older students on FastBridge. So we give auto reading, we give CBM, and then we give NWEA as a third data point. Any student who's high risk on any one of those, not multiple, but even just one, we dive deeper. Any student who is in that low average, some risk range on those, any student who is in that low average or some risk range on all 3 assessments, we also do that diagnostic digging deeper dive with those students. So Maureen, do you have anything you want to add on?
The other thing that I think is important to point out is we have all of these assessments, and then the other big piece of that is that anytime these screeners are done and we give those diagnostics where we can kind of see those skills, those reading specialists are also working with the classroom teacher to see how students are performing on those grade level standards. So when you see those report cards come home and you see the standards that we're expecting students to master by the end of each grade level, that's another piece of it. So we're always looking at more than one data point when we're making these decisions about what students are needing as far as their literacy is concerned. And then that's going to be a really important part of knowing when they're ready to exit the plan is we have these benchmark assessments and we have these report cards with those outline of all those standards to see how students are progressing. So it's really a collaboration between the reading specialists and the classroom teacher to decide where students are at.
All right, thank you. We have one final question here. If a child already has a documented reading deficiency and therefore has an IEP, will they have a reading success plan in addition to the IEP, or the IEP only?
The long answer to that is it depends. If a student has an IEP with specific reading goals identified, that IEP will serve as that child's reading success plan. The reading success plan, if we wrote one, would look identical to the IEP as far as goals and strategies of progress monitoring. We do have some students who have an IEP for something else. It may be an IEP for attention or something of that nature. If a student has an IEP without specific reading goals on it, that student is definitely still eligible to have a reading success plan. So we really look at it on a case-by-case individual student basis.
Well, before I say have a wonderful evening, sometimes you can't think of the questions you want to ask. So if you think of questions later, you can email Mrs. Stabler, myself, or Dr. Valter at any time, and we will get an answer for you in regards to Lindbergh Reading Success Plans or other elementary academic questions. Now, thank you and have a wonderful evening.